In the last class, which was 1 week back, we were discussing about the recommendations for the poverty line estimation, right? The recommendations and the suggestions made by people like S. Rangarajan. And we also studied about the other committees' recommendations also. So today we will be discussing about certain discussions on the BPL issues, that is the below poverty line issues. That will be the concept which we will be focusing on. Along with that, we'll be studying certain portions of inequality also. So we'll start with, you can write it down, the Saxena Committee, SAXCNA, Saxena Committee report, the Saxena Committee report to review the methodology, Saxena Committee report to review the methodology for conducting BPL census, in rural areas. So we've already discussed about the Rangarajan committee and other committees, and whichever committee is named after one person, we take that committee by that name. So here it is the Saxena committee, and the chairman of this committee or this expert group is Dr. N.C. Saxena. Okay. The chairman or the head of this group, the head of this committee report is Dr. N.C. Saxena. And he was a member of the Planning Commission. Dr. N.C. Saxena was a member of the Planning Commission of India. So this committee, the Saxena committee discussed two different topics, or they divided people or categories of poverty line estimation into two. One is on the basis of the automatic exclusion, and the other one is the automatic inclusion. Okay. So automatic exclusion, what do you mean by automatic exclusion? Where people are excluded from a certain category. Okay. So when are people excluded from the BPL category? എപ്പോഴാണ് people BPL കാറ്റഗറിയിൽ നിന്ന് എക്സ്ക്ലൂഡ് ആവുന്നത്? When they fulfill certain conditions which make them the above poverty line category, right? BPL കാറ്റഗറി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ബിലോ പോവർട്ടി ലൈൻ കാറ്റഗറിയിൽ നിന്ന് APL കാറ്റഗറിയിലേക്ക് മാറുന്ന എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു കണ്ടീഷൻ അവർക്ക് ഉണ്ടെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, if they are able to satisfy certain conditions like that, they are not a part of this BPL category. If not, they are a part of this BPL category. So they have termed it in two different ways. One is the automatic exclusion. You may note it down. Automatic exclusion, and the other one is known as automatic inclusion. Okay. And you can write down the heading of automatic exclusion, under which we will write automatic exclusion. Households that fulfill any of the following conditions. Households that fulfill any of the following conditions will not be surveyed for BPL census. Will not be surveyed for BPL census. The first point is families who own double the land. Families who own double the land of the district average. Families who own double the land of the district average of agricultural land. Families who own double the land of the district average of agricultural land. Agricultural land per agricultural household. If partially or wholly irrigated. That is families who own double the land of the district average of the agricultural land per agricultural household if partially or wholly irrigated. Okay. So that is the first point. Second point, families that have three or four-wheel motorized vehicles, families that have three or four-wheeled motorized vehicles, such as jeeps and SUVs. So families that have three or four-wheeled motorized vehicles, such as jeeps or SUVs, are also excluded from the BPL category or from the BPL census. Families that have SUV. Next point, families that have at least one mechanized farm equipment. Families that have at least one mechanized farm equipment, such as tractors, harvesters, etc. Tractors, harvesters, etc. Harvesters. Families that have any person who is drawing a salary of over rupees 10,000 per month, drawing a salary of over rupees 10,000 per month in a non-government or private organization or in a private organization or is employed in government on a regular basis with pension and other equivalent benefits. On a regular basis with pension and other regular benefits. Okay, so what does the Saxena committee focus on? It focuses on taking the BPL census or a survey on the BPL category or the below poverty line category. And they have termed it into two. That is, one point is automatic exclusion and the other point is automatic inclusion. So when does this automatic exclusion happens? When it follows the certain conditions in such a way that they have much more income than the expected level of income that makes it to the below poverty line category. Okay. Some of these conditions, if a person or if a family attains at least one of these conditions, they don't follow or they don't fall into the category of BPL category. Okay. That is why they are automatically excluded from that category. And for these type of people, for these families, the BPL census is not taken into consideration. They are not taken into the survey while taking the below poverty line category. And who are those people who are automatically included? So for that, you may write down automatic inclusion. That is to know the people who are included in the survey, automatic inclusion. First point is designated primitive tribal groups. Designated primitive tribal groups. Next point is SC groups and Maha tribal groups or Maha Dalit groups. SC groups and Maha Dalit groups. Single women headed households. single women headed households. Single women headed households. Households with a disabled person as breadwinner. Households with a disabled person as breadwinner. Households with a disabled person as a breadwinner. Household headed by a minor. Household headed by a minor. Homeless households. Homeless households. Homeless. And households that have a bonded laborer as a member. Households that have a bonded laborer as a member. So these are the ways. I think you got that point. Households that have a bonded laborer as the member. Okay, so these are the ways in which the Saxena committee, headed by Dr. N.C. Saxena, views BPL category, or this is how the form in which they take the BPL survey or the BPL census. There are two categories of people who are automatically excluded, who are automatically included. Those people who follow or who are able to satisfy the conditions met under the automatic inclusion policies. Exclusion policies, they are automatically excluded from the census. ഇതിൽ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു കണ്ടീഷൻ അക്സെപ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഫോളോ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഒരാള്, ഒരു ഫാമിലി, ഒരു ഹൗസ് ഹോൾഡ്, they are automatically excluded from this BPL survey because they don't follow into the category of below poverty line. അതല്ല ഇതിൽ ഏതെങ്കിലും പറയുന്ന ഒരു കാറ്റഗറി, if they are from a primitive tribal group or if they belong to the Mahadalit group, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ if they have a bonded laborer as the main member of the family, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു single women headed household ആണെങ്കിൽ, if it follows certain conditions, or if it follows at least any one of the condition, they come under the below poverty line category. So they are automatically included into the category of below poverty line. And that was the finding by Dr. N.C. Saxena and the Saxena committee. Okay. So that's regarding the Saxena committee. Next up, we'll understand the causes of poverty in India. The main causes of poverty in India. Causes of poverty in India. What can be the different causes of poverty in India? We have already learned unemployment. We have termed certain things under that as the causes of unemployment. We can take certain things from that also. What do you think can be the cause of poverty in India? Lack of resources. You may just point out something. What can be the causes? Poverty is there. Poverty is very prevalent in India, especially in northern India. Why? How does poverty occur? What are the causes? What are the main causes of poverty in India? What's it? Lack of education, inequality. Okay, so you can write it down. We'll combine all these points. The first point is semi-feudal land relations. Semi-feudal land relations and failure of land reforms in India. Semi-feudal land relations and failure of land reforms in India. The land reforms in India has failed considerably, and that is one of the main reasons of poverty in India. Next is a point which we have discussed in almost all the areas we have learned, that is a rapid growth of population. Rapid growth of population. So when there is a rapid growth in population, okay, when there is a rapid growth in population, what is the adverse effect it has on? or how does it cause of poverty? We told that there is a rapid growth in population is a cause of poverty. Now, how does it cause poverty? Resources will be scarce in the sense that the per capita availability of resources will lessen or will reduce. Okay, you may write it down. The per capita availability of resources, that you can note it down as a sub point of that main point. That is, when there is a rapid growth rate or growth of population, the per capita availability of resources will reduce. Per capita availability, that is per person availability of resources will reduce. Failure of the next is next third point, failure of the small and marginal farmers. Failure of the small and marginal farmers to bear the cost of rising inputs. To bear the cost of rising inputs. Failure of the small and marginal farmers to bear the cost of the rising inputs. That's the input cost, okay? Rising inputs, the rising cost of inputs. So what do you think? I mean, the failure of the small and marginal farmers, they automatically have a very low income, okay? Or a low rate of income. And when does this become an issue? It becomes an issue when they are not able to meet the rising cost of inputs, okay? There are certain inputs which are required in the field of farming or in the field of agriculture, like fertilizers, subsidies, they require fertilizers, pesticides, etc. So when these things, when the inputs, when the machinery, when it costs high, it automatically creates a lowering in their income. Okay. If they have been receiving an income of say 10,000 rupees, and if the price of fertilizers and pesticides rise by 50%, okay. If it was 5,000 rupees, now it has risen to say 10,000 or 15,000 rupees, they will not be able to match their income with what has been the rise in the cost of production, right? That is the cost of production or the cost of inputs. So when there is a rise in this cost of inputs, automatically it creates an issue for the small and marginal farmers. The rich farmers, the farmers who have a lot of land, the farmers who have a lot of machineries, capital, etc., they might not find it difficult because they have a very good source of income, very good hike in income. But these people, the small and marginal farmers, find it very difficult. Okay. The next point is due to less availability of employment opportunities. Due to less availability of employment opportunities. This is also a very common and a very prevalent point and a very contemporary point in the sense of India. That is, the employment opportunities are pretty less. And what is one cause for that? That is rapid population growth. As the population growth increases, we are not able to generate employment as much as the rise in the rate of population. So that is one of the issues which causes poverty in India. Okay. The low growth rate of, next point which you can write down is the low growth rate of rural wages. Low growth rate of rural wages as compared to inflation rate. Low growth rate of rural wages as compared to inflation rate, and consequently low growth rate of real income, and consequently low growth rate of real income. So the people who suffer the most in India is the rural India or the rural sector of India. That sector mostly involves which sector into consideration? Primary sector or the agricultural sector. So the speciality or the problem which they are facing, the rural India is facing, is that they have a very low income, or the wages that they are receiving is very low as compared to that of the urban wages or the urban sector wages. Okay. So the people in the rural sector who are mostly farmers or who are mostly involved in the primary sector activities like farming, agriculture, fisheries, etc., these people find it difficult to make their both ends meet. or their income is not sufficient, the rise in their real income is not sufficient to buy capital to meet the daily needs of those people. Okay. The next point is adverse effect of development. Adverse effect of development on small scale and cottage industries. Adverse effect of development on small scale and cottage industries. Cottage. Adverse effect of development on small scale and cottage industries. And this point shows you something, okay? Adverse effect on development of small and cottage industries, automatically what does it do? It lacks or creates a slowish or sluggish growth of the rural sector or the rural industrial sector. Okay, when there is a lack of development in the small and cottage industry sector, the small scale sector, as well as the cottage industries, which are primarily located in the rural areas of India, it causes a lower growth rate in the rural sector of India. Okay, so that can be a point which you can note down as a sub point of that. That creates a rural backwardness or a lack of rural infrastructure in India. Lack of infrastructure in rural India. Next point which you can note down is the low growth rate of industrial and services sector. Low growth rate of industrial and services sector, and consequently inability of these sectors to absorb the surplus labor force, inability of these sectors to absorb the surplus labor force, from the agricultural sector. Surplus labor force from the agricultural sector. So low growth rate of industrial and services sector is also an issue. So when you analyze the causes of poverty in India, when you analyze these points, you can understand that the land reforms have not been good, or the land reforms in India have not been that efficient. There has been an issue with terms of rural infrastructure. There has been an issue with the small scale and cottage industries in India. There has been an issue of rapid population growth, which has created a lack of or a slowish growth of per capita income or per capita availability of resources for people. Per capita availability of resources means per person availability of resources. So as the population growth increased, or as the population growth is increasing even now, the per capita availability of resources has slowly declined. So all these are the causes of poverty in India. We have a lot of other causes also. So these are the set of main causes of poverty in India. And that too, when we analyze the causes of poverty in India, we can understand that most of these things, or most of these points which we discussed right now, relate to the rural sector of India, or to the rural part of India. That is regarding the small scale and cottage industries, the rural infrastructure, the small and marginal farmers. Small and marginal farmers are mostly based in the rural parts of India. So we can understand that the causes of poverty in India mainly lie in the rural areas of India, and not in the urban sector or in the urban area of India, from which we should analyze and we should come out with a solution or a suggestion that if these problems in the rural sector are analyzed and understood and found solutions, and if we find solutions to those problems, that is, if we can increase the rural infrastructure, if we can develop the infrastructure that is meant for small scale and cottage industries, okay, or if we increase or if we decrease the cost of fertilizers, pesticides, etc., if we give surplus land to small and marginal farmers, these can be the suggestions and solutions which you can find from the causes of poverty in India. Okay, so these are the problems, these are the issues from which you can you can see the point and you can make suggestions and solutions to this. And this is, if you just take the opposite of what is happening as the causes of poverty in India, you will get what are the solutions or suggestions to reduce poverty in India. And that too, when we suggest some points to reduce the poverty in India, we can understand that the basic causes of poverty in India lies not in the urban sector of India, but in the rural sector of India. Okay, that's it. Next, you can write the task force of Niti Aayog, task force. Next topic, task force of Niti Aayog on poverty. Task force of Niti Aayog on poverty. Task force of Niti Aayog on poverty. Okay. You may write it down. A task force on elimination of poverty in India. A task force on elimination of poverty in India was constituted. Poverty in India was constituted. Poverty in India was constituted under the chairmanship of under the chairmanship of the vice chairperson or the vice chairman of Niti Aayog. Under the chairmanship of the vice chairman of Niti Aayog. So they also had certain recommendations, which you can write down as the summary recommendations. Based on the deliberations, these are the recommendations, okay? The summary recommendations based on the deliberations of the task force on poverty elimination, based on the deliberations of the task force on poverty elimination, the paper considered two broad issues. The paper considered two broad issues. The paper considered two broad issues. The first issue is how India should measure extreme poverty. How India should measure extreme poverty and what should be the strategy for its elimination. And what should be the strategy for its elimination. Okay, that is the first point. How India should measure extreme poverty and what should be the strategy for the elimination of poverty. The second point is, and the discussion of eliminating extreme poverty. Okay, the discussion of eliminating extreme poverty. You can write it down in such a way: the discussion of eliminating extreme poverty. The discussion of eliminating extreme poverty can be discussed in two steps. The discussion on eliminating extreme poverty can be discussed in two steps. Steps necessary to accelerate growth. Steps necessary to accelerate growth such that it generates employment opportunities in large volumes and helps raise wages And the next step, the second step can be towards making anti-poverty programs more effective. The second step is towards making anti-poverty programs or the poverty alleviation programs more effective. You can either write anti-poverty or poverty alleviation. Anti-poverty programs more effective. So this was what was discussed in the task force on Niti Aayog on poverty. They did not make very effective or certain very powerful recommendations for reducing poverty or for elimination of poverty, but they discussed certain things, or they wanted to eliminate poverty in such a way that they wanted to raise the wages, they wanted to reduce disparities, they wanted to reduce the income, they wanted to eliminate extreme poverty from all parts of India. They wanted to eliminate extreme poverty. That was one of their major objectives. Okay. So that being the summary recommendations of the task force on Niti Aayog. It's not such an important area, but as they have not made certain forceful recommendations like what we have seen in the expert group or the S. Rangarajan committee, etc. But they have made certain recommendations or summary recommendations or small recommendations in which their view was to eliminate extreme poverty in all parts of India by raising the wages, by people getting much more income for their jobs, etc. Okay. So that was the major point of the task force on Niti Aayog. Next up, you can write down the strategies to combat poverty. The strategies to combat poverty. So we've already learned what sustainable growth is, right? What is sustainable growth? What? Yeah, I mean, that is one part of sustainable development. Whenever we hear the word sustainable development, what we must have in mind is the present generation has got a lot to use, but they are not compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. Okay. Even when we are using it for our own sufficient needs, not for our greed. Okay. നമുക്ക് ആവശ്യത്തിനുള്ളത് ഉപയോഗിക്കുക, അത്യാഗ്രഹത്തിനുള്ളത് ഉപയോഗിക്കാതിരിക്കുക. That is even what Gandhi has told you. Earth provides you enough for your need, not for your greed. Okay. So that is the basic concept. The judicious and the wise use of resources is what we mention in sustainable development. We as the present generation, we are using it in such a way that the future generation also are able to meet the needs. Okay, their needs. If we are not able to, if we are wasting our resources, or if we are overusing our resources, the future generation will not be able to meet their own needs. So that never makes a sustainable development. So sustainable development in terms is one point which he has told us, right? That is without cutting down the forest, without destroying the nature, that is using judicious use of resources, or the wise use of resources. That is not only in terms of forest, that can be in terms of the electricity use, the water you use, the nature you use, the nature you exploit, the furniture you use. In all terms, in all ways possible, we should be using resources in such a way that there is a judicious and wise use of it. Okay. That being the point, you can write down the first point: employment intensive, sustain. You can write employment intensive, sustained rapid growth. Employment intensive, sustained rapid growth. Employment intensive, sustained rapid growth. And this sustained rapid growth basically works in two channels. Okay, so you write down sustained rapid growth and you draw two diagrams. I mean, to draw two arrows for it. Sustained rapid growth, and you draw two arrows. Sustained rapid growth. First is by creating jobs, that pay, steadily, rising real wages, that pay steadily rising real wages. And in the second arrow, or as the second point, you may write it down, by generating additional revenues, that allow the government to expand social expenditure, to expand or to diversify social expenditure at a faster pace. Okay, so what do we mean by employment intensive, sustainable or sustained rapid growth? What do we mean by that? You can term it into two. You can divide it into two. The first is by creating jobs that pay steadily rising real wages. Okay, to create much more sustainable jobs, in the sense you can write it down, to create much more sustainable jobs. And the second point, what do we tell? By generating additional revenue that allow the government. Okay, the government has to find some or the other kind of way to generate additional revenue, and this additional revenue would be used for what? For expanding or for diversifying the social expenditure. Okay, I hope it's clear for you. The first point which we have written down is to create sustainable jobs, is to create jobs which causes or which increases the real wages. The second point which we have discussed right now is creating or generating additional revenue by the government, whereby they will be able to intensify or diversify or expand their spending on the social expenditure. Okay, social expenditure in the sense so-called infrastructural developments, etc. Okay, so that is what you mean by employment initiative or employment intensive, sustained or sustainable rapid growth. You can write down the next point that is under that, which is under employment intensive thing. The poor in India predominantly reside. The poor in India predominantly reside in rural areas. The poor in India predominantly reside in rural areas where incomes critically depend on agricultural growth. Where incomes critically depend on agricultural growth. So we have already said in the point which we discussed under the causes of poverty in India. What did we tell? The main causes of poverty or the main reasons behind poverty in India rise in which sector of India? The rural sector of India or the informal sector of India. Such, if you understand that, what should be done to, I'll ask you a question, what should be done to increase the rural productivity or the rural area productivity in India? How can we combat poverty in India? We are telling certain strategies and steps to combat poverty in India. And the first step which we have written down is employment intensive, sustained rapid growth. I am asking you this thing. How can we reduce poverty in India? By reducing poverty in rural areas. What can be the ways in which the rural area poverties can be reduced. I've already told you certain points when we discussed the last topic. What can be the ways in which rural area poverty can be reduced, or the rural sector poverty can be reduced? Whenever you hear this, whenever you hear the word rural sector, take the concept of farmers and agriculture into consideration. Okay. You are hearing rural sector for the first time. And when it comes to the case of India, you know that in the rural sector in India, or the rural sector of India, what does it mostly comprise? The agricultural sector or the farmers, right? So what are the basic problems of the farmers? ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഫാമേഴ്സിന്റെ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാ? അവർ നേരിടുന്ന ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ വലിയ പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ എന്തൊക്കെയാ? High price for fertilizers, pesticides, etc. Yes, that is the high cost of inputs. Next, that is one important point. What can be the other points? What are the other problems which the farmers in India face? I'm not asking you about the rich farmers in India, the small and marginal farmers. Lack of inputs, the high cost of inputs, the lack of inputs, machinery, seasonal employment. They are seasonally employed, they are seasonally unemployed. Lack of rural infrastructure is a big issue. That lack of development of small scale and cottage industries, which we told right now. These are the basic causes of poverty in India. You take the rich people, you don't have to consider them because they will not fall into this category of poverty line. But when we analyze the rural sector of India, what do we analyze first? Which sector of or which section of people do we analyze first? We analyze the so-called agriculturalists or farmers. And that too, not the rich farmers who have a lot of land in their possession, but very small and marginal farmers, okay? Who have a very small area of land, they are cultivating that. If they don't get revenue from that, they remain poor throughout the whole year, okay? We are talking about that small and regional or rural farmers, that small and marginal farmers or small and marginal agriculturalists who don't have or who don't acquire much of the land of India. So when it comes to the case of rural India, we've already told that one strategy to combat poverty in India is what? What is the strategy? Which we told right now, which we are writing right now. Employment intensive, sustained, rapid growth. Whenever we talk about employment intensive, it's not about the employment which the service sector people get. ഒരാൾ ടീച്ചറായി, ഡോക്ടറായി, ലോയറായി എന്നതുകൊണ്ട് മാത്രം ഇന്ത്യ ഡെവലപ്പ് ആവുന്നില്ല. Employment in the sense that all the people or majority of the people in India are employed. Okay, that is the point which we have to consider. And when majority of the people in India have to be employed or are to be employed as a necessary condition, which all sectors or which all sections of people do you take into consideration? Service sector is there. Employment, I'm talking about the word employment. Don't take employment into that service sector thing and the employment which you get only by getting into the all India services, etc. No, employment can be in a lot of terms. That can be to farmers. When farmers are employed in the sense that the farmers are having job for one complete year, for 365 days in a year, they are fully employed. They are completely employed. They have employment. They have full employment. They have job for 365 days. They are earning something throughout the year. Now, one point which he pointed out was that they are seasonally unemployed. That is, they are seasonally employed also, which means that if they are unemployed for around 4 to 6 months in a year, it means that they don't have income during that 4 to 6 months, right? So they are seasonally employed. So that's why I told you, when you take certain terms like employment, rural sector, agriculture, farmers, you understand the deeper concepts related to that, okay? Now, we were talking about the rural sector or the rural areas of India. So, as I've told you, what is the major composition of the rural sector of India? Agriculture or farmers. They do fisheries, they do hunting. Earlier it was hunting, now they are mostly involved in farming. So, what is the problem with farming? There is a high cost of inputs, lack of inputs are there. There are lack of rural infrastructure. There is a lack of rural infrastructure especially, and there is a lack of rural development for small scale and cottage industries. All these are issues, okay? All these are issues which looms over India, or these are the areas which India needs to focus on. So we have taken up certain strategies and initiatives to combat poverty. And one such strategy is employment initiative, sustained rapid growth. And I've already told you, whenever you hear the term employment, don't go behind the employment which you get under PSC or UPSC, etc. Okay. Employment can also be to farmers, can also be to rural sector people, can also be to the marginalized people also. That is the meaning of employment. It does not only means that getting a job and you're being paid something. That is not in economic terms. Okay. So whenever you hear the term employment, whenever you hear the term rural sector, keep these things in mind. There are different aspects related to these different terms in economics. Okay. So that's the thing. The next point which you can note down is making anti-poverty programs more effective. Making anti-poverty programs more effective. Do you know any anti-poverty program that is there in India? MG Magan Rega. Very good. Any other, some other schemes related to the government of India? One is this thing, Magan Rega, that is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. What's it? Yes, that's there. I mean, it's to reduce poverty, okay? The general sense of this is to reduce poverty or to create employment. If it's creating employment for at least one person, it means that that person is coming out of poverty. ഒരാൾക്ക് ഒരു ജോലി കൊടുക്കുമ്പോൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരാൾക്ക് ഒരു ഇൻകം ഒരു മാസം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു വർഷം ഇന്നൊരു ഇൻകം കിട്ടുമ്പോൾ what is the solution or what is the outcome of that? It means they are coming out of that poverty line, right? You are getting employment, which means that you are getting an income. When you are getting an income, you are automatically out of this poverty. So that is the basic concept. So you can write it down, making anti-poverty programs such as the public distribution system, PDS, public distribution system, comma midday meal scheme, Magan Rega, MGNREGA, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that is Magan Rega, MGNREGA. And housing for all. More effectively represents the second leg LEG, the second leg of the strategy, to eliminate absolute poverty. And we'll write down an issue which is related to the midday meal scheme. Okay, you can write it down. There is a poor convergence. Of midday meal scheme with the school health program. Okay, so that is the problem. That is, there is a poor convergence of midday meal scheme with the school health program. And what can be the solution for that? You may write it down as a solution. There is a need to form networks of medical colleges. There is a need to form networks of medical colleges. Home science faculties. Home science faculties. And state MDMS. MDMS means midday meal scheme. And state MDMS. MDMS steering and monitoring committees. Steering and monitoring committees. Monitoring committees and institutions. And institutions to evolve state specific state specific guidelines, for improved quality and safety of food. So we have a lot of anti-poverty programs, right? We have already told about the public distribution system, the Maganrega, housing for all, etc. What do you think which still lies as a major problem in developing in India, in development of India or in developing India? What can be the major reasons? We have a lot of anti-poverty programs, but what is the reason why India still has a lot of poverty? Or what can be the major reasons why India still lacks or still is below the poverty line? What can be the reasons? We have a lot of anti-poverty programs. Exactly. That is, the poverty programs are not effectively implemented, right? The execution of these programs still remains as an issue. We might have a lot of programs, we might have a lot of schemes, we might have schemes from A to Z in alphabetical order. But it's not about the schemes you have, but it's about the implementation you bring to that schemes that makes a country developed and underdeveloped. Okay. When it comes to the case of India, how well we have utilized this public distribution system, the minimum support price, the Maganrega, then other Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, etc. All those other schemes, when we analyze how good has been the implementation in India, you can note down these points, okay? These are questions which you must answer yourself. How good has been the implementation of these programs? How effective it has been? Are these programs really helping the poor? You can note down these points. How effective its implementation has been. Are these programs really helping the poor? Is it really causing a decrease in poverty? Is it really causing a decrease in poverty? Is there any benefit in continuing these type of programs? Is there any benefit in continuing these type of programs? What has been the progress so far? What has been the progress so far? If this program has been bad, what would be the way forward in developing this program? Okay, if this program has been bad or has been ineffective, what would be the ways in which you can get back this scheme on track? That is, how would you make this scheme much more effective? In simple terms, how would you make this scheme much more effective? So these are the questions which we have to address or which we have to analyze, which we have to deeply understand whenever we talk about the anti-poverty programs that exist in India or the schemes which are meant for the development of all in India. Okay. There are schemes, as I've told you, we have a lot of schemes named Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, Awas Yojana, the Kisan Credit Scheme, etc., etc. which are meant either for nourishment, that is food, or reducing poverty, or for creating employment, etc. Schemes are there. How good is the implementation? Has the schemes been effective? How good has been the implementation? How effective it has been? How many people have been moved out of poverty from this scheme? How many people were able to get employed from these schemes? These are the questions which we have to analyze to understand why India still remains as a nation that has a lot of poverty rate. Okay. India still has a high level of poverty rate. When we analyze the cases of northern India, and that to the rural parts of northern India, poverty is still a very prevalent issue, a very contemporary issue. What is the reason behind that? Even when we have schemes lettered A from A to Z, what is the reason behind, or why is it not being properly implemented? As he rightly said, is it not being properly administered? Where is the problem? Where is the loophole lying in this implementation of these programs? These are the things which we must understand to get to the answer of why these anti-poverty programs have not been effective. Okay. And we can state down solutions if we can analyze these questions which you have right now written down. If you can analyze the answers for the questions which you have written down, has this program been effective? How many people has it moved from rural to urban sector? How many people it has pulled off from poverty to an okay income level or a medium income level? If you are able to analyze these questions, you are getting the answers for the questions. Why are anti-poverty programs not being effectively employed in India, or not being effectively, taken out or carried out in India? If you are able to analyze the answers for that, you are getting the solutions for the programs. You are getting solutions to the betterment of the schemes. You are getting solutions for the effective implementation of these schemes. Okay. So that being the case, we'll discuss the next program, the Housing for All program. We've already written it down. We'll study it down in brief. The Housing for All program. Housing for All. The Housing for All rural program is a rural program. The Housing for All is a rural program that has progressed well. That has progressed well. That has progressed well overall. That has progressed well overall, but can be improved. But can be improved along several dimensions. But can be improved along several dimensions. The socio-economic caste census. The socio-economic caste census may be deployed. The socio-economic caste census may be deployed to identify the beneficiaries. May be deployed to identify the beneficiaries. May be deployed to identify the beneficiaries. Progress in the provision of housing. Next line. Progress in the provision of housing needs to be reflected. Progress in the provision of housing needs to be reflected in the reporting system. In the reporting system. The trend of the houses. Next line. Progress in the provision of housing needs to be reflected in the reporting system. Progress in the provision of housing needs to be reflected in the reporting system. Next line. The trend of houses constructed. The trend of houses constructed over the 8 years. Over the 8 years beginning over the 8 years, beginning 11th 5-year plan, 11th plan shows that the states have shows that the states have to come forward. The states have to come forward with larger resources. The states have to come forward with larger resources to meet the objectives of housing for all by 2022. You can write it down in an inverted comma. Housing for all by 2022. Housing for all by 2022 in the rural areas. Finally, comma, it may be worth exploring. Finally, comma, it may be worth exploring. It may be worth exploring the possibility of using prefabricated houses full stop. This may bring better quality and speed to the provision of housing for all. So this is a very important project as well as a very easy project to understand. Housing for all, from the word itself, you can understand that it's meant to generate or to create or to develop houses for all the citizens of India, especially focusing on the rural sector because it is much more underdeveloped than the urban areas or urban sector. So this housing for all by 2022 was a major plan by Indian government, or was a major plan in India to give all the citizens or to provide all the citizens with homes or houses. Okay, so that is a basic idea of that. But even when we analyze this plan or this important topic or scheme, we must understand that housing for all was a plan. Housing for all or houses meant for all was a plan meant for 2022. It's still 2024 and there are a lot of people even in Kerala without houses. So that's an area which we have to analyze, and that's an area which we must focus on. That is why we have mentioned a sentence in that topic or sentence in that scheme which states that the states must be much more focused on providing or creating resources. Okay, it's not only about what the nation does or what the central government does to a country. The state governments in each state must also take up this issue. They also must develop, they also must use larger resources, they also must use more resources to generate or to create houses for all the citizens of India. Okay. The next is the Jan Dhan Yojana. Jan Dhan Yojana. That's the next topic. Next, you can write it down as another topic. Jan Dhan Yojana, JANDHAN Yojana, YOJANA. Under this scheme, Jan Dhan bank accounts were created. Jan Dhan bank accounts were created through mobile phones. Through mobile phones with a promise. With a promise to eventually. With a promise to eventually revolutionize. With a promise to eventually revolutionize the anti-poverty programs. The anti-poverty programs by replacing the current schemes and leaky distribution and leaky distribution of benefits under various schemes. Leaky distribution of benefits under various schemes by the direct benefit transfers. By the direct benefit transfers, also known as DBT. Direct benefit transfers. Direct benefit transfers, that is DBT. The eventual effort should be to ensure that the families become capable of earning and sustaining above poverty level income within 5 to 7 years. Okay, so this is the program, that is Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, or simply Jan Dhan Yojana. So this was a program which was initiated to reduce the widening of people, to reduce the gap between people who don't have access to bank accounts or who don't have access to mobile accounts, mobile phone bank accounts, etc. So for that, this scheme was introduced. The Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana was introduced. And this PMJDY or JDY, Jan Dhan Yojana, it actually focused on ensuring that people are getting, or the families become capable of earning. Okay, capable of earning, and they are getting a sustainable level of income. That was the major objective of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, that families are able to earn and they are capable of getting at least something for sustaining their level of income. Okay, sustaining their level of consumption in a month. ഒരു മാസം എത്ര കൺസംഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു വർഷം എത്ര കൺസംഷൻ ഉണ്ടോ അത് മീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പാകത്തിനെങ്കിലും ഉള്ള ഇൻകം കിട്ടുകയും അതുപോലെ അവർക്കെല്ലാം ഒരു ബാങ്ക് അക്കൗണ്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു മൊബൈൽ ഒരു ബാങ്ക് അക്കൗണ്ട് എൻഷർ ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ളതായിരുന്നു. ദാറ്റ് വാസ് ദ മേജർ ഒബ്ജക്റ്റീവ് ഓഫ് പ്രധാൻ മന്ത്രി ജൻ ധൻ യോജന, ഓർ സിംപ്ലി ജൻ ധൻ യോജന. So this was basically a revolutionizing scheme in the anti-poverty program, because all other programs like Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, or PDS, Public Distribution System, or Minimum Support Price, MSP, all these policies or all these schemes or all these plans, it did not basically reduce the widening of gap between the rich and the poor. But this plan or this scheme, that is the Jan Dhan Yojana, it was able to revolutionize a lot of things. It was able to revolutionize a lot of other anti-poverty programs, as it involved people who did not even have a bank account. Okay, the people in the rural areas, the agriculturalists, the farmers, they don't have bank account. Many of them don't have a bank account. Many of them don't know what a Google Pay might be or Paytm is. Many of them might not be introduced to those kind of new technological innovations that have happened. So this was such a revolutionary program or a revolutionary scheme by the government of India to include people, to make an inclusive approach to include people in such a way that they also have access to more bank accounts. They also have access to stable monetary policies. Okay. So that was the major objective of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. And one thing which we have to analyze, you can underline that point of direct benefit transfer or DBT. And this was a scheme. The DBT was a scheme. Okay. It was actually meant in such a way that the benefits that a person should be received would be directly transferred. But there have been a lot of issues with this direct benefit transfer of schemes. Okay, direct benefit transfer of things. When we compare it with the farming sector, or when you simply take the recent union budget of 2024 for that reason. Okay, in the recent union budget, we analyzed the thing that the agriculture sector was not given much importance, but still they focused on the thing called direct benefit transfer. This direct benefit transfer has a problem. Whenever there is a direct transfer, or whenever there is a speedy transfer or quick exchange of things, always the concept that comes into issue or into consideration is the concept of sustainability. How sustainable it is. Even when we are making a direct benefit transfer, or even when we are transferring something from one person to one person or from one entity to another entity, what we have to analyze is how sustainable is that transfer. Is that sustainably good? Is that sustainably effective? All these things we have to understand and analyze. Okay. So this direct benefit transfer or this DBT scheme is something which you have to analyze and understand. The problem, it is a really good scheme. It directly benefits transfers which the government get to the farmers and all. But how good is that sustainable transfer? How sustainable is that transfer of schemes, or how sustainable is that transfer of resources is something which we should understand and analyze. Okay. So that is the thing regarding DBT scheme. You may write down the poverty and sustainable development goals. The poverty and sustainable development goals, which is also known as SDG. Poverty and sustainable development goals. Poverty and sustainable development goals. Poverty and sustainable development goals. To end poverty, in all its forms, everywhere. To end poverty in all its forms everywhere is the first out of 17 sustainable development goals. Is the first out of 17 sustainable development goals. Do you know any 5 sustainable development goals other than poverty reduction? There are in total 17 sustainable development goals are there, as mentioned by the United Nations Development Program. Do you know any other sustainable development goals or SDGs? Have you heard about sustainable development goals? You have not heard. Okay. So there are a lot of other, in total, there are 17 sustainable development goals. Out of poverty reduction comes as the first sustainable development goal. There are other sustainable development goals like reduction in inequality, then clean energy, clean air, effective transportation, etc. Reducing inequality, increasing wages, reducing gender disparity. A lot of other sustainable development goals are also there. Okay. Out of which we'll be focusing on the sustainable development goal on poverty reduction. Okay. So you can write down the point. Globally, the number of people living in extreme poverty, the number of people living in extreme poverty has declined by more than half from 1.9 billion in 1990. 1.9 billion ആയിരുന്നു 1990 അതൊരു half ആയിട്ട് reduce ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്. However, even when we analyze the statistics, 836 million people still live in extreme poverty. 836 million, okay, you should understand that number. 836 million people still live in poverty. About 1 in 5 person, or about 1 in 5 persons, about 1 in 5 persons in developing regions lives on less than $1.25 per day. Lives on less than $1.25 per day. Next point is Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Southern Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, Sahara, desert Sahara. Sub-Saharan Africa are home to the overwhelming majority of people live overwhelming overwhelming majority of people living in extreme poverty. Overwhelming majority of people living in extreme poverty. Next point, high poverty rates. High poverty rates are often found in small, fragile and conflict affected countries. Small, fragile and conflict affected countries. One in five children under age 5. 1 in 5 children under age 5 in the world has inadequate height for his or her age. Has inadequate height for his or her age. Next point, the all India poverty. The all India poverty head count ratio. The all India poverty head count ratio, also known as the HCR, has been brought has been brought down from 47% in 1990 to 21% in 2011-12 to 21% in 2011-12. That is, which means that is nearly halved. Okay, 47% to a decrease in 21% means it's nearly halved. So what is the headcount ratio? What is the headcount ratio? We have already learned that in the poverty area, the chapter of poverty. What is headcount ratio? What was the headcount ratio? Or what do we mean by headcount ratio? You can refer to that and come back. Someone please tell me what is the headcount ratio? Exactly. It's the percentage of people living below the poverty line. Okay, so that's a headcount ratio. So once you write something down, okay, you go home and you read and revisit it. Okay, you go home and read it and revisit it. You first study the portion which we study today, which we learn today, which we write today. You start reading from the topic one or from the first page of your notebook. Just you revisit it every day. Okay, you don't have to by heart all the things. You just go through the topic, at least the headings of the topic, so that the things keep remain in your head. Okay, now the headcount ratio is a very easy topic, I know. And as I asked it to you, suddenly you were not able to answer for the fact that you're not remembering that concept. So that's why I told you, you just go home, you revisit the topic, at least the names of these topics. Okay, headcount ratio, poverty line basket. What do you mean by underdevelopment? Such and such things. You take your notebook from page one, just keep on reading till what we have studied today, so that you will have an idea of what we have studied. Okay, otherwise you will lose the connection in between. And one thing which you must write down and come tomorrow is you write down the 17 sustainable development goals. Okay, you write down, you note down the 17 sustainable development goals tomorrow when you come. Okay, the 17 sustainable development goals, out of which we have discussed the development goal of poverty reduction. The next 16 sustainable development goals you write down and come. I've already told you a few, that is clean energy, effective transportation, reducing inequality, etc. Okay, next is a different topic. We have discussed several topics. We have talked about poverty. We have talked about different committees on poverty line estimation, the recommendations made. We have talked about, then we've talked about today, we talked about unemployment, different types of unemployment, forms of unemployment. So we've discussed a lot of things. We have discussed a lot of areas. Now, the thing which we have to understand, another basic issues. This chapter basically are the issues of India: poverty, unemployment, hunger, inequality. Once you understand these four topics, you are clear with the issues that India faces right now. And so the next topic is hunger. Hunger. It seems as a very easy topic, but there are certain things which you have to look into this topic. Hunger. Hunger. The terminology used to refer to different components of hunger, to different components or concepts of hunger. You can write down concepts, okay? To different concepts of hunger. Can be confusing. Can be confusing. The word hunger, you can write it down in inverted comma. The word hunger is usually referred to as the discomfort associated with lack of food. Discomfort associated with lack of food. Food കുറയുന്നതിൽ നിന്ന് നമുക്കുണ്ടാവുന്ന ഡിസ്കംഫർട്ടിനെയാണ് ഹങ്കർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. It's a situation. FAO. FAO. What is FAO? Food and Agricultural Organization. For those who don't know, you may write down the full form of that. Others, please write down FAO. Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, defines hunger as food deprivation. FAO defines hunger as food deprivation or undernourishment. Food deprivation or undernourishment. What do you mean by undernourishment? Malnutrition. I mean, a person is said to be undernourished, okay, or a person is said to be in a state of undernourishment. We might have heard this term a lot of times, undernourishment. But what is said to be undernourishment is there might be a certain set of nourishment or a certain set of proteins, nutrients, etc., that a person should consume in a country. Okay, there might be a certain set, there might be a certain degree for that, there might be a certain quantity for that. If a person is not able to consume that set quantity in a country, okay, for say if it's in the case of India, and if it's 1800 kilocalorie, if a person is not able to, this is just a random example, okay, if a person is not able to get to this quantity, or if a person is not able to consume this quantity of nourishment, of proteins, of nutrients, of vitamins, etc., that person is said to be undernourished. Okay, so when he or she is exactly, what is that? Food deprivation. What do you mean by deprivation? Getting something less than what is required. That is lack of something. That is deprivation. What do you mean by food deprivation? Having deprivation in terms of food or in terms of quantity of the food consumed. So what do you mean by undernourishment? All these are interrelated concepts. That is not able to get or to reach that certified or certain level of quantity mentioned in a country or stated in a country. That is undernourishment. Okay. So you can write down undernutrition. Undernutrition. It's not undernourishment. It's undernutrition. Goes beyond. Undernutrition goes beyond calories and significantly and signifies deficiencies in any and all in any or all of the following. It's not any and, okay, it's any or all of the following. Sorry, it's any or in any or all of the following. In any or all of the following. Energy. These are the things related to that in any or all of the following. Energy, protein, essential vitamins, energy, protein, essential vitamins, and minerals. Energy, protein, essential vitamins, and minerals. Undernutrition is the result of inadequate intake of food in terms of in terms of either quantity or quality. Okay, that is undernutrition. That is simply food deprivation. The next point which comes under that is malnutrition. Malnutrition. MAL nutrition. Malnutrition refers more broadly to both undernutrition and overnutrition So we have right now written down what undernutrition is, right? You know what undernutrition is. It's when there's an inadequate intake of food in terms of quantity and quality in terms of food. Okay, that is the inadequate intake of food. Now, what do you mean by overnutrition? We have told what undernutrition is. What do you mean by overnutrition? Is it consuming in a very high quantity or consuming very high quality of food? What can be, from the word itself, it's clear what undernutrition is. That is inadequate. What can be overnutrition? Anyone has any idea what can be overnutrition? It's not definitely not consuming something extra. Okay, don't take it from that word itself. So you may write it down. It's the problem of unbalanced diet. It's the problem of unbalanced diet. That is consuming too much of what is actually not required. Consuming too much of what is actually not required. Consuming too much of what is actually not required. In other terms, you can tell that consuming much more calories than what is the required calorie. Consuming much more calories than what is the required calorie. Okay. So you can get it from the word itself, but it's a bit different from undernutrition. Whenever you hear the word undernutrition, you must understand that there is an inadequate intake of food, okay, in terms of both quantity and quality. But when it comes to overnutrition, it's not only about over consuming the food or over consuming the intake of food or proteins, vitamins, etc. But it's also about taking an unbalanced diet. It's not an balanced diet and consuming over calories, which are not required for the body. Okay. It's over the requirement. That's not required. That is consuming too much of something that is not required. So what all topics have we seen till now? Someone please summarize the topics. We have what we have learned today, what we have written today. We started from the Saxena committee, right? We started, I'll summarize it for you. We started from the Saxena committee and that was a report to review the methodology of conducting BPL census in rural areas. They divided people into two categories. One people would be automatically excluded, the other would be automatically included. How were the people automatically excluded? If they followed or if they satisfied any condition which met the conditions of the above poverty line category, they were automatically excluded. And people like single women led household or people like designated primitive tribal groups, people who were of the Maha tribal groups or the Maha Dalit groups, for that reason they came under the category of automatic inclusion. Okay, they were automatically included into that survey of below poverty line. We discussed the different causes of poverty line, which included rapid population growth, the failure of land reforms in India, lack of rural infrastructure, lack of rural credit. If you have not written down that point, you can write down lack of rural credit is also an issue. Okay. Of the causes of poverty in India, lack of rural credit for those who have not written it down. Then we discussed about the task force of Niti Aayog on poverty. We discussed certain summary recommendations based on that. Next up, we discussed the strategy to combat poverty. And what was the strategy? Employment, intensive, sustained, rapid growth. Exactly. That was one strategy which we discussed. Making anti-poverty programs more effective. That was one topic which we discussed. We discussed the Jan Dhan Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. What did we discuss under that? We stated that people should not be divided, or there should not be a high widening of gap between people of those who have bank accounts or those who have access to much more technology and not. People should be getting much more access to bank accounts through mobile phones, etc. We discussed that. We discussed about direct benefit transfer schemes and the issue which is there of the sustainability involved in the direct benefit transfer schemes. We also discussed about poverty and sustainable development goals. I've told you have to write down 17 sustainable development goals. Make sure you by heart all the 70 sustainable development goals, out of which one was poverty reduction. And we have studied the concept of hunger. What do you mean by hunger? It's about the inadequate intake of food in terms of both quantity and quality. Okay. We have discussed undernourishment and overnutrition, malnutrition also. So these are the concepts. Now we'll discuss about global hunger index after a break. Okay. We'll break till 12 and we'll discuss about the global hunger index. Okay, so we were discussing the concept, the topic of hunger, right? So as I've told you, the next topic which we have to learn under hunger is the global hunger index. The global hunger index or GHI. Global hunger index or GHI. GHI is designed to GHI is designed to comprehensively measure and track hunger, comprehensively measure and track hunger globally and by country and region. And by country and region. It was first published in 2006. It was first published in 2006. Calculated each year. Calculated each year by the International Food Policy Research Institute. International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI. International Food Policy Research Institute, comma, the GHI or the Global Hunger Index, the GHI highlights successes and failures. The GHI highlights successes and failures in hunger reduction, and provides insights into the drivers of hunger by raising awareness and understanding of regional and country differences in hunger, comma, the GHI aims to trigger actions. The GHI aims to trigger actions to reduce hunger. Okay, so now as you know what GHI is, or global hunger index is. Let me ask you a question. If GHI is increasing, what does it mean? Or if there is a high GHI, what does it mean? You understand that sentence, you understand what we have written. If there is an increase in GHI or if there is a rise in GHI, that is a global hunger index, what does it mean? Poverty is increasing. Okay, you may write it down. An increase in GHI, I'll tell it to you how it happens. An increase in a country's GHI score, an increase in a country's GHI score indicates that the hunger situation is worsening. The hunger situation is worsening. And what will be the vice versa of that? Vice versa means what will be the opposite of that? If the score is decreasing, it means that it's not poverty, hunger is reducing. Okay, or the hunger condition is reducing in such a way that there's an improvement in the hunger situation. So that's the situation. Have you learned about some other indices? Have you learned some other index in the previous classes? HDI. Any other index which you remember, which we have learned other than HDI? PQLI. Physical quality life index. Okay. Okay. Okay, these two. Other than that, we studied about the multi-dimensional poverty index. Who was the proponent of HDI? Dr. Mahbubul Haq was the proponent or the main. He was the main person who brought out the Human Development Index. When was it brought out? When was HDI introduced? When was HDI introduced? You revisit your chapters. I mean, you go back to that chapter of HDI. Have you written down this thing called HDI? When is it? I'm asking you, when was it introduced? I've told you several times when HDI was introduced. Was it in 2000, 2010, 1980, 1990? When was it introduced? 1990. 1990 was the year in which HDI was introduced. Okay. So that's the thing which I told you. You have to revisit these things. Okay. You have to summarize the things which you learn every day. You go from page 1, you just read the things which you have hearing in the class, which you are writing down in the notes. Okay. So the proponent of HDI, as we rightly said, is Dr. Mahbubul Haq, and it was introduced in 1990. We have also learned other indices like the multi-dimensional poverty index, the physical quality life index, and now we are learning about the global hunger index. So what does a rise in GHI score mean? An increase in GHI score means that hunger is reducing. The hunger is increasing, which means that the hunger situation is worsening, right? You see, what does it measure? What does GHI measure? What is it measuring? It is measuring the hunger situation in a country. Okay. So if the GHI score is rising, what does it mean? A thing is measuring, I mean, this index is measuring the hunger situation in a country. If India hunger situation is measuring GHI score high, if we tell that the GHI score is high, It means that the hunger situation in the country is bad, right? Hunger situation measure ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ score high എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ നല്ലതാണെന്നല്ല. It doesn't mean that the hunger situation of the country is high. It means that the hunger situation of the country is high. It means that the hunger rate is high. Hunger rate high ആണ്. അതിന്റെ അർത്ഥം എന്താണ്? Hunger situation worse ആണ്. അതേപോലെ decrease in GHI score shows what? You tell me what? Hunger situation improve ആയി. Hunger situation improve ആയി, hunger rate reduce ആയി. Okay, you write down that that mathematical thing. When GHI score increases, you write it down mathematically. Hunger rate increases. You put down a up arrow or something. And in the hunger situation, it increases. I mean, it improves. Hunger situation worsens. Okay. GHI score increases. So you write down GHI and you put an up arrow for that. Okay. When GHI score increases, what is the thing? Hunger rate. GHI score has increased. So what does it mean? Hunger rate has increased. Yes. So you write it down. Hunger rate increased. And so the hunger situation worsens. So you can put the down arrow for that. That's it. Once you understand this, it will be easy for you to understand that. Okay. There is GHI score. Okay. You see, if the GHI score is high, okay, global hunger index in the score high ആണെങ്കിൽ അതിന്റെ അർത്ഥം ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ കൂടുതലാണെന്നാണ്. ഓക്കെ, ഹങ്കർ അത്രയും ആൾക്കാർ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ ഹംഗ്രി ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത്രയും ആൾക്കാർക്ക് അത്രയും വിശപ്പുണ്ടെന്നുള്ളതാണ് കാണിക്കുന്നത്. ദേ ആർ ഹംഗ്രി, ദേ ആർ ഹങ്കർ ഓർ ദേ ആർ ഹാവിംഗ് എക്സ്ട്രീം ലെവൽ ഓഫ് ഹങ്കർ. അത്രയും ആൾക്കാർ ഹങ്കർ ഉള്ളപ്പം ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് ഹൈ ആയിരിക്കുമല്ലോ. അത്രയും ആൾക്കാര് ആ ഒരു കാറ്റഗറിയിൽ പോവർട്ടി കൂടുതലാണെന്ന് റേറ്റ് കൂടുതലല്ലേ. ഓക്കെ, സിമ്പിൾ തിങ്. അത്രയും ആൾക്കാർ ഹങ്കർ ആയിട്ടുള്ളപ്പം ഹംഗ്രി ആയിട്ടുള്ളപ്പം ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് ഓട്ടോമാറ്റിക്കലി ഹൈ ആയിരിക്കും. ഓക്കെ, ഈ ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് ഹൈ ആണെന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ഹങ്കറിന്റെ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ? ജനറൽ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ എങ്ങനെയാണ്? ഒരു മോശം സിറ്റുവേഷൻ അല്ലേ, വേഴ്സന്റെ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ ആണ്. ദാറ്റ്സ് വാട്ട്. അപ്പൊ നിങ്ങൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ട കാര്യം ഒറ്റ റിലേഷൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയാൽ മതി. GHI സ്കോർ കൂടുതലാണെങ്കിൽ ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് കൂടുതലാണ്. ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ് കൂടുതലാകുമ്പോൾ അത്ര ആൾക്കാർ ഹംഗ്രി സിറ്റുവേഷനിലുണ്ട്, വിച്ച് മീൻസ് ദാറ്റ് ആ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ മോശമാണ്. ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഹങ്കർ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ മോശമാണ്. ഓക്കെ, യു ടേക്ക് ദോസ് ടു കോൺസെപ്റ്റ്സ് ഓഫ് GHI സ്കോർ ആൻഡ് ഹങ്കർ റേറ്റ്, from which you will get the other thing, that is the situation of hunger in India. Okay, I hope you got that. You just go home and read it and revisit again. Okay, so that's the thing regarding that. So the four there are certain indicators for this GHI, as we have told, as she told in the physical quality life index. We have got certain three things under that. We have certain component indicators under GHI, which you can note down as undernourishment, child wasting, WASTING, child wasting. It means that the proportion of children. What do you mean by child wasting? You can write that down. The proportion of children under the age of 5 who suffer from wasting. Now, do you know what wasting is? Who suffer from wasting. Proportion of children under the age of 5 who suffer from wasting. WASTING. Wasting means they have a low height for their age, a low weight for their age, etc. Okay. പ്രായത്തിനൊത്ത ഹൈറ്റ് ഇല്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രായത്തിനൊത്ത വെയിറ്റ് ഇല്ല എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത് ലോ ഹൈറ്റ് ഫോർ ദ റേഞ്ച്, അതാണ് വേസ്റ്റിംഗ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. They have a low height for, wasting. They have a low height for their age, or they have a low weight for their age, etc. That is what is known as child wasting. Okay, so there is undernourishment, there is child wasting, child stunting. STUNTING, stunting, child stunting. Again, the proportion of children under the age of 5 under the age of 5 who suffer from stunting. That is a low height of their age. Okay. Pokkamillaima. That is stunting. Stunting literally means low height for their age. Child mortality. Child mortality. The mortality rate of children. Mortality means death. Okay. Mortality rate of children under the age of 5 who died due to inadequate nutrition, who die due to inadequate nutrition, unhealthy environment, etc. Okay, so what are the major indicators or the component indicators of GHI? What are the major indicators? Someone please tell me. Undernourishment, child mortality. So what do you mean by child wasting? Yeah, no, I mean, what does that show? It shows undernutrition. Okay. So that is the meaning of child wasting. And you now know what child stunting is, a low height for their age, and there is child mortality. Okay. I can write in the global hunger index report. In the global hunger index report of 2018, the global hunger index report of 2018, the performance of India, the performance of India was such that in the global hunger index report of 2018, the performance of India was such that India ranked 103rd, 103rd out of 119 countries, 119 countries. 119 countries, 103 ആയിരുന്നു ഇന്ത്യയുടെ റാങ്ക്. With a score of 31.1, with a score of 31.1, which comes under the serious category based on GHI classification. The score of 31.1, which comes under serious category based on GHI classification. So we have told about GHI classification. You can note down the GHI classification. Write it down in 2 sections. Category, score. Okay. Give a heading. That's a GHI classification. Category and score. Category and score. Category, first category is extremely alarming. Extremely alarming. 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 Extremely alarming. Score 50 or more. 50 or more. Next category is alarming. $35 to 49.9. 35 to 49.9. Serious. 20 to 34.9. 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 20 moderate, 10 to 19.9, 10 തൊട്ട് 19.9 വരെ. And low, last category is low, and it would obviously be less than 10, score less than 10. So to which category does India belong? Serious category. Actually, India now comes under this alarming category. Okay, India's hunger index has, hunger score has risen, and so India comes under this, alarming category. But still, serious category would be enough, because I think the score is around 33 or 34. It's not 35, I guess. So, as per the GHI classification, it would still be a serious. It would be under the classification of serious category. Okay. Next up, you can write down the measures to tackle the issue of hunger. So you now know what hunger is, the classification of hunger, which index measures hunger, and now the measures to tackle the issue of hunger, or measures to tackle hunger. In India, the availability of food, at national level, is not an issue. The availability of food at national level is not an issue, but the same at the household level, is definitely an issue. Thus causing an issue. Thus causing apprehension, that the families, that the families do not have purchasing power. That the families do not have purchasing power. What was purchasing power? We learned what purchasing power was. What was purchasing power? I mean, in sentence, what is purchasing power? Can you frame it in a sentence what purchasing power is? You can tell it in Malayalam also. Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the money required to buy a certain degree of goods, or the money required to buy goods. That's known as a purchasing power. Okay. When you have the desire to buy a good and it's backed by the income you have, or if it is backed by the amount of money you have in hand to buy that good, you have the purchasing power. Okay. So that's it. And we have an act named National Food Security Act. Okay. National Food Security Act, or NFSA. National Food Security Act of 2013. National Food Security Act of 2013. The Food Security Act is a good measure. The Food Security Act is a good measure at this point in time. At this point in time, considering the widespread inequalities considering the widespread inequalities and the injustice in distribution in certain areas. Considering the widespread inequalities and the injustice in distribution in certain areas. This act along with Maganrega, this act along with Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, that is Maganrega, comma, NRLM, that is National Rural Livelihoods Mission. NRLM, National Rural Livelihood Mission. NRLM and the skill development programs of the central government will play the role of short-term initiative. Hunger issue is not just about food, but is wholesome with malnutrition. This is one of the areas where FSA or Food Security Act becomes silent. As a further measure, it would be good to include the provision. For nutritive food also in FSA, comma, by fortifying F-O-R-T-I-F-Y-I-N-G, fortifying the grain supplied to the poor family through research and development, through R&D. Grain supplied to the poor family through R&D. If you want to write research and development, you can write research and development, or else you write R&D. The extension of the midday meal scheme. To the higher secondary school levels. Can also be a good measure. To tackle the issue. Malnutrition issue. Next line. Malnutrition issue is not one which is limited only to the poor. Malnutrition issue is not one which is limited only to the poor families, but also in higher income groups. issue is not one which is limited only to the poor families, but also in higher income groups. This shows the need of awareness programs and conscious effort. This shows the need of awareness program and conscious effort from the side of individuals, along with to get the real fruit of it. Okay, so that's it regarding hunger. To tackle the issues of hunger, if one major issue is tackled, okay, if one major issue of poverty is tackled, okay, poverty is a major issue which affects India and rural India. If that issue of poverty can be addressed, if that issue of poverty can be tackled by the schemes which we have at hand, a lot of these hunger issues can be resolved, right? If a family is lifted from the below poverty line to the above poverty line, if not to the above poverty line, at least they are able to get the minimum quantity of food required and the minimum quality of food required. Okay, if they are getting a minimum level of income, doesn't that solve this issue of hunger a lot? Doesn't that help this in solving this problem of hunger a lot? So that's where if all these problems are interrelated. One person is unemployed, he can be a poor person, that can lead to poverty, which can lead to the hunger issue. Okay, the same case you take it, a person who was unemployed is given an employment opportunity, is now employed. His employed situation is making him get out of or lift up of the poverty situation that exists, which automatically improves the hunger situation. Okay, which automatically provides him income, which automatically provides him with food. So that's how all these topics which we have studied till now are interrelated. Unemployment, poverty, hunger, the problem which you are going to study is inequality. All these are interrelated. Okay, all these are interrelated concepts. Once a person gets an employment or a person is able to get a good job in the sense that a medium level of income, he will be able to get out of poverty. Once a person gets out of poverty, automatically he will be able to resolve his hunger issues. So that is why all these topics are the causes of one and the other thing, and all at the same time can also be the solutions to another thing. So if employment is provided, automatically he will get out of this poverty basket. Automatically he will get what? His hunger situation will improve. Okay. So in this way, all these things are interrelated. So we have also seen the measures to tackle the issues of hunger. We have the National Food Security Act of 2013. And we have also told that there are certain issues under the National Food Security Act of 2013, whereby we have to give awareness to people regarding this hunger issue. We have to address the needs of the people. We have to tell the people that such and such are the conditions required to meet the necessary requirements of food. You have to take in such and such calories of food each day to not go undernourished or unnourished or malnutrition in a state of malnutrition. There are people not only in the poor family groups but also in the rich family groups who are affected by malnutrition. So these are the problems which we have to analyze and understand whenever we talk about the issue of hunger. Okay. The next up, write down hunger and sustainable development goals. Hunger and sustainable development goals. To end hunger, achieving food security, and improved nutrition, and sustainable agriculture. You can underline those points. Okay, you can highlight those points. To end hunger, what all do we need to do? We need to achieve food security. We need to have an improved nutrition, and we need to have a sustainable agriculture. What do you mean by sustainable agriculture? What do you mean by sustainable agriculture? Yeah, you may tell. What do you mean by sustainable agriculture? What do you mean by sustainability? I've already told today itself. What do you mean by sustainability? Yeah, it's about the present generation meeting their own needs. At the same time, the future generation will not, they should not compromise their own needs. Okay. They should also be able to meet their own needs. That is sustainable development. Now, what is sustainable agriculture? You take that same concept to the main concept of agriculture and say what is sustainable agriculture. Exactly, that can be one point. Soil fertility is something which produces what? Agriculture, farming, right? Which enhances farming, right? It improves farming. If the soil fertility is good, it means that it will have the soil will have a good produce. So automatically reducing soil fertilizers, reducing chemicals in the soil, increasing manures, increasing use of manures, increasing use of biological and good components in the soil. Even when we are using high yielding variety seeds or fertilizers or pesticides, reducing the chemical content in it. Okay. All these can be what? Factors contributing to what? Sustainable agriculture. Okay. So that is sustainable agriculture. You are maintaining sustainable practices in agriculture. Do you know the concept of sustainable, stubble burning? Has someone heard about, you have heard about stubble burning, right? Where is it more prevalent in India? Punjab, Haryana, Delhi, northern regions. Okay. And what is stubble burning? Yeah, exactly. Agriculture waste and the remains are burned, and that actually decreases or depletes the quality of soil. Okay. Stubble burning. That's a major problem in India. That can be a major problem in other countries also. But when we analyze the condition of India, that is a major problem, stubble burning. So stubble burning is one issue which hinders the sustainable agriculture, okay, or which reduces the rate of reduces the growth of sustainable agriculture. One thing is stubble burning. What can be the other reasons? One he told, overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, etc. What can be the other reasons? Deforestation. Deforestation can be, a very good example of hindering sustainable agriculture. Any other examples which you know? These are very common general things. Sustainable agriculture, something which is hindering sustainable agriculture. I did not hear it. Depleting crops. Okay. Unscientific methods of cultivation. Okay. What's it? Yeah. Genetically modified crops and unscientific methods of cultivation. Okay. All these can stand as hindrance to what? Sustainable agriculture. So to end hunger, what do we need? Hunger and sustainable agriculture. We need sustainable agriculture. We need food security, right? We need food security. We need improved nutrition. We need sustainable agriculture. Okay. So I am just taking out each and every concept for better clarification to you. So that's it. And in the case of India, can we end hunger? In the case of India, you take the current scenario of India, can we end hunger? Yeah, exactly. As we have told certain points in terms of India, right? Stubble burning or unscientific methods of cultivation, GM crops, etc., overuse of fertilizers. All these are hindrances to sustainable agriculture. Food security still is an issue in India. Improved nutrition is not there in India. Nutritional deficiency is there in India in a lot of children, not only in the rich families, not only in the poor families, but also in the rich families. So these three things which we told as the concepts or as the solutions to end hunger still are remaining in India, still is remaining in India and at a very high rate. Okay. The hindrances are lying at a very high rate in India, which means that India is still now not in a position to reduce hunger. And that is the reason why we have a GHI score of what? GHI score of 31.1 or something. Okay. So that is the reason why we have that very alarming or alarming situation of GHI score. Okay. It is because we are not able to address this issue of sustainable agriculture, food security, improved nutrition, malnutrition, etc. Okay. So you may write it down now. This is the second SDG. Okay. Second sustainable development goal. I've already told you one, which is poverty. Second is hunger. Globally, the proportion of undernourished people, in the developing regions has fallen by almost globally, the proportion of undernourished people in the developing regions has fallen by almost half, since 1990. From 23.3% in 1990, from 23.3% in 1990 to 12.9% to 12.9% in 2014-16 period. To 12.9% in 2014-16 period. 2014-16. 2014 to 16. The vast majority of the world's hungry people, the vast majority of the world's hungry people live in developing countries, where 12.9% of the population, where 12.9% of the population is undernourished. 12.9% of the population is undernourished. Do you know the continent which has the vast majority of the world's hungriest people? Asia. You may write it down, the vast majority of the hungriest people lies in the continent of Asia. Lies in the continent of Asia. Okay. Sub-Saharan Africa is a region. Sub-Saharan Africa is a region with high prevalence of hunger. With high prevalence of hunger. About 1 in 4 are undernourished. about 1% in 4 people or in 4% are undernourished. 1 in 4. 4 undernourished ആണ്. Next point, poor nutrition. Poor nutrition causes nearly half, that is 45%. Either you can write nearly half or you can write 45% of deaths. Nearly half or 45% of deaths in children under 5, under the age of 5, under 5. Poor nutrition causes nearly 45% of the deaths in children under the age of 5. 66 million primary school age children. 66 million primary school age children in developing countries attend classes hungry, with 23 million in Africa alone. With 23 million in Africa alone. Agriculture, you can write it down as the next point. Agriculture is the single largest. Agriculture is the single largest employer in the world. Agriculture is the single largest employer in the world, providing livelihoods. Providing livelihoods for 40%. Providing livelihoods for 40% of today's global population. 40% of today's global population. It is the largest source of income. It is the largest source of income and jobs. Largest source of income and jobs for poor rural households. Largest source of income and jobs for poor rural households. Someone please read what we have written under the measures to tackle the issues of hunger. Someone please read that. Measures to tackle the issue of hunger. Someone please read.
The measures to tackle the issue of hunger. In India, availability of food at national level is not an issue, the same as household level is definitely an issue. Thus, forcing apprehension that the family not have purchasing power. National Food Security Act of 2013. The National Food Security Act of 2013 is a rule which has at this point in time consuming and wide spreading inequalities and injustice in distribution in certain areas. This act along with MGM, RGA, NRM, and the skill development program of the central government will play a role of short-term initiative. Hunger issue is not just about food, but it's also with malnutrition. This is one of the areas yet but state becomes silent As a further measure, it should be going to include the provision for which the rule also is emphasized, but 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 modifying the rates applies to the whole family through R&D. The extension of midday meal scheme to the higher school level also be a good measure to tackle the issue. Malnutrition issue is not one which is limited to poor families but also in higher income groups. This shows the need of awareness programs and conscious effort of the side of individuals along with the real good of which hunger and sustainable development goals. To end hunger, achieving good security and improve nutrition and sustainable agriculture. This is the second sustainable development. Globally, the proportion of underprivileged people in the developing regions has fallen by almost half since 1990 from 23.3% in 1992, 12.9% in 2014 to 16. The majority of the world's hungry people live in developing countries where 12.9% of the population is underprivileged. The vast majority of the underaged people lives in the continent of Asia. Sub-Saharan Africa is a region with high prevalence of partner profits are underprivileged. Overnutrition causes nearly half, that is 45% of deaths in children under 5. 66 million primary school age children in developing countries attend classes grade 23 million in Africa. Agriculture is the single largest employer in the world, providing livelihoods for 40% of today's global population. It is the largest source of income and jobs for poor rural households.
Okay, so we'll start with one poverty alleviation and employment generation program. Okay, we'll start with one and we'll continue it tomorrow. You just start writing poverty alleviation, ALLEVIATION, poverty alleviation, ALLEVIATION, poverty alleviation and employment generation programs. With a view to achieve, with a view to achieve with a view to achieve with a view to achieving, make it achieving, with a view to achieving inclusive development, several poverty alleviation, and employment generation programs. Several poverty alleviation and employment generation programs are being implemented by the government of India. You can note down the first scheme, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. The flagship program, FLAG-SHIP, flagship program of the government of India. The flagship program of the government of India touches the lives of The flagship program of the government of India touches the lives of the rural poor and touches the lives of the rural poor and promotes inclusive growth. And what is the main aim of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act or scheme? Employment generation. Okay, more than a poverty alleviation scheme, it is more of an employment generation scheme. Okay, by creating or generating employment for a person or a family or a household, that is the way it tries to reduce poverty. Okay, it's not a direct poverty alleviated scheme or a scheme meant to reduce poverty alleviation in a direct sense, but it is meant to increase the employment generation capacity in a country, whereby it can lead to a reduction in poverty also. Okay, so the main aim of you just write the short form of that, Maganrega or Maganrex RAGS. The main aim of Maganrega or that scheme is to enhance the livelihood security. The end is to enhance the livelihood security of households, in rural areas, the livelihood security of households in rural areas of the country by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage, by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in a financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual labor, whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual labor. You just read that statement and tell me what it means. You just read that statement, which we have written right now. What Magandega is, what we have written right now. You just read that. What's it? Exactly. So it is to provide 100 days, okay? 100 days of guaranteed wage employment. Out of the 365 days that are there, it is to provide them with at least 100 days of wage employment. Okay? Jolly wage ensure. It is to give them at least 100 days of wage employment. And at the same time, it is to, for those, which kind of people, as we rightly said, it's to those people who are unskilled manual laborers. Okay, it's not to those who are skilled laborers, but to those unskilled manual laborers who are finding it difficult to make their both ends meet, who might be in the situation of poverty. Those adult members in a family who are volunteering to do the work, to do the unskilled manual labor work, they will be given 100 days in a year, 100 days of guaranteed wage employment. Okay, That is the meaning of, or that is the main aim of Maganrega. And you can also write down, it also mandates MANDATES, it also mandates 33% participation. It also mandates 33% participation for women. 33% participation for women. And what will be the primary objective of this scheme? What is the primary objective of this scheme? Just to create wage employment, right? So you can write it down. It is to augment wage employment. The primary objective is to augment wage employment. Primary objective is to augment wage employment or to create wage employment. But one of their aims or one of their subsidiary aims can be to increase the participation of women also. Okay, that is 33% of women, participation of women, augment wage employment, augment wage employment. That is the main or the primary objective. And one of the subsidiary aims or one of the aims among that is to provide more participation to women. Okay, 33% of women who are ready to do unskilled manual labor, they must also be brought into consideration. Okay, that is the concept or the main aims of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Okay, so we'll learn there are a few things associated with this act, and also we have to take up the concepts, other schemes related to poverty alleviation and employment generation, and we have to also learn the concept of inequality. So we'll take up that in the next class. Okay. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.